One of the most interesting parts about the world of XRP to me is this Riddler element. No other part of internet technology or cryptocurrencies has had this fascinating connection to symbolism and the occult and assigning meaning to these somewhat benign elements. So, we're going to dig into that today. What does that mean, and how can you kind of make sense of it? Hey, welcome to the show. Molly here. Today we're going to talk about symbolism, meaning, the occult, XRP Riddlers, and how we can kind of make sense of all of this sort of strange elements to this bizarre era I think that we're living in. I've had a kind of a strange couple of weeks. This past week has been very unusual in that, I've been putting out content for a very, very long time. I've done it in various platforms. My platform of choice these days is not only YouTube, obviously, you're watching this here, but I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. And for the most part, it's all been pretty chill. I got into a bunch of heated debates back in 2020 with more political, social type issues. But this past like 2 or 3 weeks, my Twitter stuff has been taking a lot of heat. And over the weekend, I got attacked and accused of some things. And what it reminded me was of a very valuable lesson that I learned when studying sales and psychology around meaning. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to tie it into some of the occult symbolism we see in XRP. So the first lesson that I learned a while ago is that nothing has meaning unless we assign it. And was a challenge to believe at first, because you're like, what are you talking about? Things mean what they mean. But let's go over a couple examples. So let's say you have two people who are driving in traffic and it comes to a standstill. One person could freak out and get very upset and anxious. They're going to be late. The town I live in sucks, and I'm going to get in trouble, and all these sort of negative consequences as a result of this event that has happened. And they assign all this meaning that this is bad, that I'm going to get in trouble, and that other people are going to be, disrupted. And it's a very negative experience. One car over, you have the same person who's in the exact same situation who is interpreting this event differently. Maybe this person has been very busy all week and they've been wanting to listen to some podcast, and now they finally have some time where they can't go anywhere and they can unpack this content or whatever they've wanted to listen to. So you have two identical situations, two people in the same boat, but they're choosing to assign different meaning to an event. And as I was going through this weird stuff this weekend with, basically, I had to tell myself, okay, so some person that you don't know typed a bunch of words into the internet, and somehow this is making you mad. Why? What is that about? And it's because I gave meaning to that person's intentions, that person's sentiment around what words they typed. And when you sort of say these things aloud and break them down in a belief structure, which we're going to do today, you realize so much of the drama and problems that sometimes, maybe myself included, experience is totally made up in our head. And this really ties to understanding how beliefs work, the dangerous nature of beliefs. I'm going to get into some that caused me some trouble, and how you can fix them. And then we're going to kind of tie it into what it means for some of the things going on in our strange era that we live in. All right, so beliefs have three elements. This is standard belief structure. This is out of one of the textbooks that I have, many on this topic actually. And you have a cause. So there was a car accident. Then you have an effect. Traffic has stopped. And then you have meaning. My day is ruined. And you realize that we have a pretty good handle on the objective parts around cause and effect. So if something happens like it rains, then the consequence, the effect is that the road will be wet, right? But the meaning is then where it gets very, very interesting. What does it mean as a result of the road being wet? Now it's going to be dangerous to drive. There's going to be car accidents. I should stay at home. And we assign all of this meaning to events that don't necessarily deserve that meaning. One expression that I learned when I was a kid, that like I don't even remember life before I knew this. I was very, very young when it was kind of implanted into me, is this expression, red sky at night, sailor's delight, red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. And my entire life, if I ever see a red sky at night, like this thing runs, if this script runs through my mind. And I'm always like, all right, cool. I say it, I have to confirm, wait, red sky at night, that's good. And if I ever see a red sky in the morning, my subconscious runs this script again, and it's wow, I'm worried. Some reason the sailor's warning me there's going to be bad weather. Now, the funny thing about this belief is that this is so programmed in my subconscious, like I don't even have to consciously trigger it. This, like, I see the red sky, it runs. And I believe it. Like, I usually seek to confirm the accuracy of this belief. No, and actually, I kind of know at a conscious level that it's unlikely that that is actually 100% predictor. But I still have this belief that runs through my mind. And what is sort of fun when you learn this idea is that beliefs can be changed, especially when you are conscious of those beliefs and want to change them. And this kind of relates to the idea that very few things, including ideas, including concepts, including tokens, including beliefs, have intrinsic meaning or value. One of the things that took a bunch of heat for this week on the Twitter was a thread on intrinsic value, especially as it related to tokenized assets. And it's an interesting idea because I think this concept of intrinsic meaning, not everyone is working off the same definition. So when we're talking about an idea doesn't really have meaning until we assign it that. Imagine if you just explained a concept to a baby, like a child who's old enough to understand your language, but doesn't have any context around how to interpret a concept. So if you were to tell them like, oh, the stock market tanked today, they'd be like, okay, I don't know what that means. So that idea of the stock market tanking doesn't have intrinsic meaning to someone until you assign an emotion to it, generally, assign a consequence or some other kind of related idea that embeds into it. And this is sort of the idea of meaning. And the funny thing about doing this lesson right now is that I was a data analyst for a very long time. I've talked a bit about this on the show. And my job for a long time, like I did this like 15 years, was to look at data and tell people what it means. That was literally the question. I would stand up in front of the room, present to people, and their question would be, all right, we have all this information. What does it mean? And that was my role, to interpret this information. We had a cause, and so you showed, it was advertising research. So we showed a bunch of people ads. They reacted in a certain way, and then my job was to tell people, what does this mean? And you also I learned that data itself doesn't really have intrinsic value. Like, it has to be interpreted. The mind, the brain has to assign some kind of subjective meaning to it. And this is where now what I developed over a very long period of time was a set of beliefs that if data looked a certain way, then I knew what the interpretation meant, and I could kind of spit that out really, really quickly. We'd see like trends and all that kind of stuff. But the funny thing about that is I did learn this lesson way before I kind of got into the psychology of things, that things only have the meaning that we assign them. And we're going to talk about some money beliefs. We're going to talk about some other kind of societal beliefs, that these are actually some that I have had and worked through, and maybe still a little bit, some of them, based on kind of the environment that I grew up in, and the people who influenced me and taught me things. And your parents play a role, but those aren't the only people you learn from. You learn from, your parents' friends, you learn from teachers, you learn from kind of other people in society, TV shows, like other parts of society kind of implant these beliefs. And I'm going to read to you a couple of them, but I don't have any idea where they came from. Like these particular ones, like, well, one of them I do know, but these particular ones, I think they kind of built over time because if I have a belief about something and you come along and you challenge that belief, I'm going to reject it via my cognitive dissonance. So if you want to really change my belief, I either have to consciously and actively make a choice to do that, which we'll talk about, or you got to work on me for a while. This is why advertisers, I used to do this for a living, they tend to show you ads minimum of 15 times. Like, and a lot of the ads that you remembered your whole life, you saw them way more than that. Like, to really plant a belief in you, I've got to clock some time and work on that for a while. So, all right, here's some money beliefs. And I used to teach when I used to coach my soap makers. We went over this, and there's a great book here. Of course, I had it the other day. I don't know where it is. About, anyway, money beliefs. They're dangerous. And it kind of depends on, I think, where you grew up in. And if you grew up in an environment where there was so much skepticism about money, that can really kind of affect you. So I grew up with this belief. First one is that you have to work hard to earn money. That if it comes too easily, there's a catch, or there's some kind of scam or con, or you are doing something bad. That, like, the genuine, the honest, honorable way to earn money is through hard work. Like, I absolutely grew up with that belief. And so if I've been in situations where people have just given me money, I almost don't want to accept it, or I am skeptical that there's like some hidden agenda. Where the funny thing is that money is just a placeholder of an exchange of value. If people were to give me a gift that has monetary value, I don't have the same level of problem with that. And when I was working with the soap makers, we would often use this analogy that a lot of them would give away soap like it was not a big deal, but they paid money for the ingredients. They put a lot of time, and their time has value. And so they essentially are giving away a derivative of money. And they didn't look at the giving away money in the same way that they looked at giving away soap, which is kind of strange, right? Because money doesn't have any inherent like value that a physical product doesn't have. But we have a lot of we have been programmed with money stuff. And so that was the first one, is that if I'm earning money, I have to work hard for it. Then another belief that I developed, which has been a problem, is that if I make a lot of money, it's going to be taken away. That is also one that when you have something programmed into your subconscious, what happens is that if you're unaware of it, what happens is you make decisions that align with that belief. So I made a bunch of decisions, and I can look back and see them clearly. And it was, I think my subconscious was like, don't bother. If you get that, it's just going to go. It's just going to be gone. I kind of know where it came from. It doesn't matter. But the idea, but I wasn't consciously aware of this belief at the time. So I didn't recognize that I was making decisions that were actually in line with this belief when I was seeking a very different outcome. All right, the next one is that I developed this belief. I think that a lot of this has come from media and programming and some people I knew kind of growing up, but this idea that money is tied to greed and exploitation. So if you are pursuing a path to lots of money, you're probably greedy, and you're likely going to exploit people. And so that is bad. And there are much more honorable ways to pursue goals than about money. Yes, that is absolutely a belief that I'm aware of. I don't think it's true, because here's the thing, like, money is this inanimate object. It's a placeholder for an exchange of value. And, if you want to exploit people, it doesn't really have anything to do with money. If you want to be greedy, you can hoard soap. You could hoard toilet paper. You could hoard eggs lately, like all sorts of things you could hoard in this sort of greedy capacity. It doesn't necessarily have to be money. And there is a tremendous number of very, very affluent, wealthy people who are massively generous and give away tons, and they are kind and they're not exploiting anybody. So this belief is a generalization that is not actually something I can prove at scale, but still, when programmed into your subconscious, you realize it's going to cause a bunch of problems. All right, I'm going to talk about the XRP buyback for a minute, because this is another area where I've had people coming at me pretty aggressively in some cases with their beliefs being projected onto me. And I'm doing my best not to take any of it personally. But one of these beliefs is that the government would never give money to people like me. Well, do you know that that has not ever happened before? Do you know that that could not happen in the future? And who are people like you? How would you describe people like you? So would the government give people money to people who are different than you? And so when you kind of break down this belief, you can see that, I mean, the government, the U.S. government is giving lots of money to a country in Eastern Europe, which we don't even know where it's going. So if they're going to do that, why wouldn't they give money to other people? So when you kind of break these down with a lot of questions, this is often a therapy tactic. Actually, is you can kind of see the fallacy in this belief. Another belief related to buyback is that there is no way that something worth 50 cents could increase quickly to a value of $50,000. Again, what is that based on? Is that a technical limitation? Is that because you have not seen it happen in your own life? Is it because it just sounds illogical? Therefore, you're saying it's not possible. And when you break down these beliefs with a series of questions, you can see that they don't necessarily make sense. And people who have an open mind and are willing to question their beliefs are able to work through these more quickly. I've certainly been doing them for a while with my money stuff. I also, related to the money, but it's like its cousin, and this was a problem for me early in my career, I had some pretty negative beliefs around CEOs. I grew up with this, idea that like if you were the CEO of a big company, you'd somehow had to exploit people to get there. You would have to climb over other good people to get to the top. And I kind of walked away, I kind of entered my career with this idea that CEOs like aren't good people. Like you don't want to be one of those people. And what happened with me is I joined this startup when I was like in my 20s, and I was the first employee, did well there, worked very hard. And the CEO and I got along great. And he was kind of grooming me to be CEO, should I, if I wanted that. And it started with, it wasn't like an overt like training program. It was just, hey, you know what? If you want to, this could be a great opportunity for you to expand. Honestly, it was doing similar stuff to what I'm doing now, which wanted me to liaison with press as like an analyst who spoke to the financial and media news, whatever. I was so resistant to it. Absolutely. I had an excuse at every stage for, I can do all the work that you want me to do, but if you want me to step into this sort of CEO training role, I had these problems. And what I did not know at the time, it was that my subconscious had this like flag. It was like, ding, 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 ding. If you start going down that road, you're going to have to become a bad person to be in that CEO role. And when I actually was in the CEO role years later, I made a bunch of dumb decisions, which is why I'm not in that role anymore. It's another long story for another day. But, I think it comes back to this subconscious belief that I had programmed in me very early on that I was going to have to do bad things if I wanted to succeed in that role. And that created this inner conflict. So these beliefs, like they are a big deal. And we all have beliefs. We're all programmed with them as kids. Generally, they're done to keep you safe. You have to have rules to participate in society and to be part of like a family and be part of a community. So you can't not have beliefs. And some of these beliefs are probably rooted in some element of truth. The problem is that I, and others have like internalized these to the point where we assign meaning to them in other situations where they weren't necessarily intended. But your beliefs change. So don't mean to like create a despair and panic here. I mean, I grew up belief in Santa Claus, right? I believed at a young age that this Batman in a suit came down the chimney and left presents for me. And obviously, I don't believe that anymore. And so as you kind of grow older, some of these beliefs you had as a child, they dissipate because you are given new information and new evidence to disprove that belief. Related to this are fears. Like there were things that I was really scared of when I was a kid that, I've learned aren't really that big of a deal. So fears can be alleviated as you gain experience. And that a fear is a belief. I'm scared of something because it's going to hurt me or whatever. And that can be broken. Now, in a bad side of this, beliefs can change too. Like you can have incredible amount of trust maybe in another person, and that trust is broken. And now this belief you have can change that type of relationship. And maybe even you project that onto future relationships. You're like, well, if this one person did this bad thing to me, then, well, I'm going to assume that all people will do that to me in the future. And that's where these beliefs can also get change. Also, I found becoming a parent, my beliefs on things change as a result of a new perspective. So when you're a kid, you kind of sometimes give your parents a hard time. You're like, oh, they were so mean to me. They just wanted to press me or whatever. And then when you become a parent, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now that I can see this situation from this direction, all right, I see this situation through a new lens. So one powerful way before we get into the symbolism stuff to work through some of these beliefs, because beliefs around money, beliefs around the way you think things have to be, or the way you think things are, or the way you think other people are that aren't necessarily true, those beliefs can be reframed. That's sort of the psychology label for it. And one way to do that with yourself is just to ask yourself, how do you know that that belief is true? So let's say this idea that the government wouldn't give us money for XRP, like, how do you really know that's true? You might say, well, I've not seen it happen before, but lots of things happen that have never happened before. Or it might just feel like too much money. Well, too much money relative to what? And you can ask these questions to see that the belief might not be as solid as you thought. It's also likely that another viewpoint is possible. As that example I said about when you're a parent and you kind of switch roles, you see things from a different angle. Well, what happens with your belief if you were to look at it from another side? And then another interesting thing is to ask yourself, what does this mean if my belief is not true? Let's say you just do this like hypothetical argument with yourself. Okay, so let's say I've decided that, well, CEOs are good people, or not all CEOs are bad. Okay, what does that mean then if I throw out that belief that I had that they were bad? Well, it means that, I can maybe pursue a career that I thought would come with consequences that aren't necessarily true. All right, let's hop over to symbols. So related to beliefs are literal symbols. Sometimes these are generally visuals that you see and recognize that have a widely accepted meaning in society. Great example is a stop sign. Like, I don't even have to see the word stop. Hopefully you don't either. You notice this red shaped octagon, and in your subconscious that means you have to stop. There's plenty of traffic related, road related symbols. We also see symbols for flags. We see hand gestures as symbols, and these are widely accepted. But one thing that's important to remember is that the value and the meaning is not intrinsic. It is assigned, and it can be reassigned, and it is somewhat subjective. Now, we're not going to argue or debate probably about a stop sign because that has been widely accepted for so long. It's kind of difficult to question. But when we get into interpreting like the actions of other people, one of the biggest ways you can get into trouble in life is to try to assume someone else's intentions based on what you either experienced in the past or how you might act. It's dangerous, right? This kind of happened to me with this weird stuff over the weekend with these Twitter comments. Is like I was assuming the intention of this person. I don't know this person. How on earth am I supposed to? I don't even know if they're a real person. I don't know anything about them. How am I supposed to know what their intention is? And that was sort of when I realized, like, I'm making this a bigger deal than it has to be. I have given it this meaning where the intrinsic value of their actions was a bunch of characters written on the internet. Everything beyond that point, including what the content meant and the implications of it and the intentions of it and the energy behind it, those were all made up in my head. The meaning was not intrinsic at all. All right, so the Riddler idea with XRP is I absolutely fascinated with it. It's probably one of the things that I found so when I got into XRP land, I found three things right away. I found ETHgate, I found the XRP buyback thing, and I found these Riddlers. And this combination of this package deal was like, hold your horses. I'm going to stay here for a little while after I'd been burning through every other blockchain, creating reports and analyses for them. And I was like, this is neat. What's going on here? I'm fascinated here. And this Riddler element where there is almost a cult related symbolism that you have people, these Riddler characters who kind of post these things in a variety of formats, generally Twitter, videos, and then the community assigns meaning to them, which I have to decode them and decipher them, which I find lots of fun. I don't know if I'm terribly good at it because I don't have a whole lot of experience in the occult. Honestly, that world scares me a little bit. So I kind of observe from arm's distance. And there's a fair number of spiritual connections and connotations to this that I love to watch. Mr. Poole is probably one of my favorite of the occult Riddler types, and he's not really unique in any way to XRP or whatever. That's just, I think, something that the XRP community, especially those who are tied to this Riddler element, they watch and report on. And I kind of just see it as something fun to try to figure out, like a puzzle. I don't have a lot of experience with this, so I don't have a lot of beliefs either way around it. And this is where I think it gets differentiating. If you come from a world where symbolism is a big part of your life, a big part of your culture, a big part of your belief system when you grow up, you see these symbols, you're going to give them meaning. You're going to give them weight. You're going to take them more seriously. If you have no idea what symbolism is or whatever, you're probably just going to ignore it. So your belief structure is going to dictate what kind of credence you give any of this stuff. And there's a bunch of these other guys who post. I mean, this Bearable guy, he has a bunch of fun things, and I've looked at these these images, and I'm like, okay. And I'm grateful that other more skilled interpreters generally are generous with the comments about who these characters are and what they think they mean, and it kind of goes back to historical references, and it's kind of fun. But again, the point of why I'm bringing this up is that they only have meaning to those who choose to give it meaning, and the interpretation uh, is subjective, and that's kind of a little bit different than our tried and true symbols of like the stop sign and red, green, yellow lights. And then it kind of ties into this idea of logos. So people, myself included, love to have fun with the XRP logo. I'm going to do a separate video on that one because there's some like mathematical ties, and that's kind of its own neat thing. But if we look at some of these, I just pulled a couple of random logos. So we have 3 crypto related ones, XRP, and there's sort of this symbolism of as above, so below, kind of this idea of mirror image. And that ties into kind of these sort of spiritual connotations almost related to the occult. Now, as someone who's created a bunch of brands, many of which have had logos, I do know that sometimes people create logos and they don't really mean anything. But certainly not like within a cult connotation. If you have looked at any of my logos and they have that, I can assure you it was totally random. Maybe my subconscious did that, but probably not. And when you look at stellar, there's sort of this interesting idea of a celestial being. The Tether one I always found fun because if you create Tether, a stablecoin company, fintech company, I'm fascinated with Tether, by the way, you would generally want it to be something that would have like financial stability and longevity and trust. I mean, you're converting dollars into stable coin. And a lot of people interpret this Tether logo as like a nuclear bomb ring. Like if you see those images of like the nuclear balloon mushroom thing, I guess, and it has like that ring around it. It's kind of what Stellar looks like. Now, Amazon is another example of a logo that has some symbolic meaning. And I don't think I noticed this for most of my life, or ever since Amazon's been around. That arrow underneath is going from A to Z. So it's showing you that the breadth and depth of Amazon. So I don't think there's anything necessarily like mysterious about it, but you can use symbolism to create another connotation. In this case is to explain part of the value of the offer, which is everything under the sun from A to Z. And then I'm going to leave the CERN one here for you to dig into should you choose to go down the CERN rabbit hole. One of my favorites. It's dark, it's bizarre, it's strange. And if you play around with that logo, you can see that there are some interesting symbols for a company that's supposed to be like kind of a science research center based in Switzerland. So those are my kind of interpretations for all of you on symbolism, on beliefs, on how to change your beliefs. And when you find you have an open mind and are willing to question and explore the beliefs that you have, especially around money, especially around what's possible, you can see that there is a pretty straightforward process to shift some of these beliefs, especially if they're kind of getting in your way and a little bit negative. I have certainly found that when I at least became aware of these beliefs and confronted them in a way, it helped me to at least remove their automatic instinctual reflex within my subconscious when it came time to make decisions. So, all right, if you have any comments on this, please feel free to share them. Please like the video. That helps me out with YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you have not, and we will see you in the next one.